Mr. Speaker, I promise I will try my utmost to be as clinical as I can.
Do more than promise.
Yeah, I promise, Mr. Speaker. I give you my solemn word. As to whether I'm capable of doing that, it's like asking the leader of the opposition to speak the truth. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to make some points here. You know, and it is the kind of disrespectful conduct within this chamber that causes persons on the street to behave the way they behave. Here we have a leader of the opposition in whose favor a ruling probably did not go. Well, not even a ruling, Mr. Speaker. The facts don't support what he's asserting. But then again, Mr. Speaker, you are dealing with a character who has overtly said that the truth is what you believe it to be. So his truth, irrespective of being diametrically opposed to documentation that has been filed in the land registry, he believes his truth is his truth. Mr. Speaker, he referred to your humble servant as El Crapo, a name, Mr. Speaker, El Guapo, yes, a name, Mr. Speaker, that they have been using himself and the United PAC and supporters of the United Workers' Party have been using to describe me. But you know, Mr. Speaker, if it were me that were to refer to him as an expired product or a large white, they would jump on my tail and prepare a list of insults which they say I hurl at members of the opposition without justification. But I'll not call him large white. I will not call him an expired product. In patois, they call large white gros blanc, and it is not necessarily conducive to any pleasantry. I'll refrain. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition spoke immensely about corruption, and he was going down the road, the Bannon's land, selling a piece of land, Mr. Speaker, selling a piece of land. He asked, where are the tender documents? But the hypocrisy is so glaring, Mr. Speaker. Selling a piece of land, where are the tender documents, Mr. Speaker? I had to smile. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding you tried desperately to bring him along alignment of reality, he was steadfast in his belief that only the ground floor of the Diamond was sold. That is not true. The document clearly says that the company, which was owned by the government, sold the 5.47 acres of land together with all buildings erected thereon. How can you, any lawyer knows that, you can never introduce oratory evidence. You cannot use words to depart from a written document, the contents of a written document. So if you want what you want to say to be incorporated, write it down. And you have a transfer for the entire thing. And then he says he sold the ground floor. I am not here to give anybody a lecture in the sale of property, Mr. Speaker. But anytime part of a building is sold, that building is registered under the Condominium Act. The main parcel of land retains its original number, its parcel number, and each apartment, each block, each villa, each condo has an annexed number. So you would have block and parcel 1254B, 128, V5, V6, F1, F2. That makes no reference to any ground floor. And what he's attempting to do, Mr. Speaker, is to incorporate a development agreement. The development agreement speaks only to rental. And I just want to read a couple sentences from it. You know, he keeps talking about the ground floor, Mr. Speaker, This was executed on the 11th of March 2021 before Mark Maraj, yes, the name, yeah, Mark Maraj, and it says development agreement for leased premises, 2 floors, first and second, comprising 78,406 square feet. At paragraph rent, the rent payable by the tenant per month is $4 per square foot, which totals $313,000 a month in this agreement. How can you now tell people that you are paying rent for a floor that you own? I mean, that is so nonsensical that it flies in the face of reasonableness. You know, and he went on and on, Mr. Speaker, about corruption. Mr. Speaker, when he was selling this land, he was selling Diamol, which was valued at the time for $60 million. He sold it for $5 million US, or 13 million. Less than 1/4 of the price. The question is asking me now, in relation to a mere 2 acres of land, was there any tendering before he sold that? Was there any tendering? Was there any tendering on the Cabot lands? Was there? Mr. Speaker, under his watch, in fact, there is a cabinet conclusion that sold land to a minister who was in that cabinet at less than $1 a square foot. And I can call a name because it's a fact to Mary Isaac. I have the cabinet conclusion. Was there tendering? Mr. Speaker, when Timothy Mangal, I can say it because I have the evidence, was manager of NHC, he bought several plots of land at Marigo for less than $2 a square foot. Was there tendering? In Tuya, that same Timothy Mangal, Mr. Speaker, coveted, confiscated, whatever you want to call it, 16 lots of land. Was there tendering? You know, today, you were prime minister. You were prime minister. You rented offices. You rented offices from companies in which you have an interest. If that is not insider trading, if that is not nepotism or whatever you want to call it, that is outright corruption, Mr. Speaker. Outright corruption. It is no wonder, Mr. Speaker, it is no wonder in 2017, the corruption index for this country shows that our most corrupt year was 2017 under the leadership of Alan Shastley. The most corrupt year. Before that, we had stability from Stephenson King, from the Labour government. Very stable, we were at 70 to 71%. Then we went down to about 40% under him. Stephenson King steadied the ship. And now, under this prime minister, we're going back up. So if you have to talk about the most corrupt prime minister, it has to be him. Has to be him. And then have the audacity to talk, Mr. Speaker, you know, about lands, and they say they didn't want the land, and the abandoned land is, you know, Mr. Speaker, quite honestly, you know, and brag about his wife has been caught. Mr. Speaker, the DSH, land the man did not sell to Tiwa. He sold some land to Tiwa King next to the airport for less than $4 a square foot. $3 and something cents a square foot with outright title. Why didn't he give it to the people of Viewfort? Why didn't he give it to the people of Viewfort? $3 and something cents a square foot. Was there tendering? Absolute ownership, Mr. Speaker. What he did not sell, he lists at $1 an acre for 99 years. Was there tendering? You know, I can go on and on. Our biggest project in this country, St. Jude Hospital, over $180 million was expended on that structure, Mr. Speaker. Was there tendering for any one penny? Not a penny was tendered, Mr. Speaker. one of his former ministers in Guy Joseph was permitted to act as prime minister for 1 day and gave $12 million in direct awards in 1 day. So if he worked 8 hours a day, he was given $1.5 million in direct awards every hour. You know, let's face it. And today, this man has the audacity to stand and talk on corruption. You have the guts. And you know, Mr. Speaker, 11 days before the last election, 11 days, there was another direct award of $70 million. 70, they were bleeding the bull, Mr. Speaker. A virtual impossibility, except once you had the leader of the opposition and the member for Castries Southeast at the time. They were bleeding the bull. $70 million, Mr. Speaker, of direct award 11 days before an election. And you know what he did to the people of this country? You know what he did to the people of this country, Mr. Speaker? He would have asked them to pay 1% per day interest in the event of late payment. So, Mr. Speaker, when you accumulate that, you take Cabot, that was worth 30-something million. It was worth more, but you take the pensioners' money, give it to Cabot to buy the land, and to hell with pensioners. You take that. You take the mall that was valued at 60-something, sold it for less than 25%. You take DSH. You take all the lands, all of them did. You take St. Jude. You know, Mr. Speaker, the corrupt practices in that last administration is glaring, more than glaring. By the way, I need to ask him, but he left, where are the materials and the equipment for St. Jude? Where are they? They must be in forest here somewhere. You know, taking your supporters to go and confiscate property belonging to taxpayers and pretending they are the high and mighty, you know. And today, and I tell you why, Mr. Speaker, 2017, our most corrupt year. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to belabor this point because the bill before us is a very, very good bill, Mr. Speaker. But I'll say this again, and it was the member for Castries North who was prime minister then, when all of a sudden the same member of the leader of the opposition came to cabinet for us to acquire lands for them to build a hotel. You remember? You remember? And he, you know, acquired lands without the guys giving us 1 penny. Something, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, that I really, really cried about. My heart ached me that we were taking land from the reasonable men and women, firemen, police officers, nurses, down the south, and vesting it in a company that had not given us 1 penny. You remember that? When you came in, you were prime minister, and when the guys took the land, mortgaged it, and they were about to seize the land, when there was a cry to you, member from Beaufort South as prime minister, and you gladly paid the $40-something million for the people to get back the land. Those are the kind of egregious and corrupt deeds that this man and his cohorts have put this country through, Mr. Speaker. You know, Ernst & Young. Where Ernst & Young came from? Where Ernst & Young came from when our loyal civil servants have discharged their duties with such professionalism, Mr. Speaker. All of a sudden you come in and you bring in Ernst & Young, and having paid them over $50 million to assist you in doing what we pay civil servants to do, and there was never a need for it, they turned their backs because they realized the coffers were getting empty. And he resorted to the very civil servants that he had discarded from the inception. The question is, are people getting paid for those things? Is there a cutback? I don't know. I don't know. But certainly, Mr. Speaker, the Transparency International had every reason every reason to call the Alan Shastney administration the most corrupt in the history of this country. And it's on record, Mr. Speaker. It's on record. So, Mr. Speaker, I mean, even with the real estate and everything else, I do hope, Mr. Speaker, that there ought to be, we should institutionalize that authority that is left with the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Public Service, where a prime minister can rent from companies that belong to himself, his father, and his sisters. That practice must desist, Mr. Speaker. It is either we legislate against it, or we do something to prevent this insider trading. Because had it been America, look what they did that actor. What's the name for insider trading? They jailed her. You all can remember? Nobody can remember? Martha Stewart. She was jailed for insider trading. But today, there are several lists, Mr. Speaker, in the name of companies entered into when this man, the leader of the opposition, was prime minister, between the government of St. Lucia and those companies in which he has an interest. If that is not nepotism, if that is not insider trading, if that is not dishonesty, it qualifies to be labeled corrupt activity, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, that having been said, I support this, and I'm hoping that even with government, there will be some kind, Mr. Speaker, some kind of insulation, Mr. Speaker, between government as an entity and landlords, so that it cannot be that the one who is calling the shots is the Minister of Finance and is the one who enjoys the rental of his building. Something is fundamentally wrong with that, Mr. Speaker. And if persons cannot see that, then something is fundamentally wrong with them. We have a problem. We have a problem, Mr. Speaker. And I'm hoping that when this thing comes on board, Mr. Speaker, we shall be able to get some reprieve. How can you tell me, Mr. Speaker, you're selling a mall that was valued at $60 million. You sell it for less than quarter of the value. Okay? Then, hear this well, the 5 million US that we sold it for, we never received it. It remained as a deposit for the over $200 million that would be accumulated at the end of 16.5 years. We never received a penny. We had to pay to retrofit. It was like signing a document and giving away a government's asset. And today, this very man, what Mr. Speaker wants to speak of corruption. Mr. Speaker, it's autism. You know, range developers came here without a penny and they left with $32 million. You know, Permandu came here without a penny, they left with 13. You took people from Cayman Group. We had to come in this chamber to approve $25 million, over $1 million a month, when our people could have done what we had to do. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I'm very happy that this House, with its extreme and acute record keeping, obviously through the teachings and supervision of the Honorable Speaker, is able to furnish this chamber with the deed of sale, the deed of transfer, to which absolutely no reference is made to any ground floor. It is referred to in the development agreement, which is basically a rental agreement at $4 a square foot. But Mr. Speaker, with those few words, one observation I made is that the leader of the opposition had one of his subordinates here, Mr. Speaker, who left him, and it speaks loudly. I saw him trying to tell the leader of the opposition, don't go there, sit down, don't say that. But you know, the truth is what you believe in. He went on and on until the member from Social Saltibus felt that in his interest, it is best to disassociate, and he left him in the chamber by himself. This, Mr. Speaker, is a crying shame. Mr. Speaker, I'll end here, but I will continue elsewhere. Thank you.